Hi there, it's Kevin with RogueDeckBuilder.com here with an update to the Orzhov Control list. As you can see, I just went 5 wins and 1 loss in the competitive constructed, meaning this is a 3-game match. Arena has updated the competitive constructed to allow you to choose whether or not you want to go first or second if you win the die roll, as well as after a loss, it allows you to choose if you either go first and second. So it's getting more legitimate as time goes on. So as you can see, went 5-1. The matchups were all tier decks. I went against Mono Blue, aggro, went against Golgari, midrange, the heavy on the Planeswalkers, so heavy on the Vraskas and Vivians version with Fine Finality. Then I beat the Mono Red aggro and beat Jeskai Control, and then lost to the easiest matchup out of all of those. In fact, I put those 4 a lot tougher matchups than the matchup that I lost, which was against the let's see, it was against Celestia tokens. So that was the gist of it. Or I didn't even, oh yeah, and I also beat Arclight Phoenix. So we saw we covered the entire meta, like everything in the meta, except for like a Boros aggro, but you can kind of say that we covered that with the Celestia tokens as they share the vast majority of cards. Celestia tokens a little bit tougher than I would say Boros aggro because they have ways to get out of sticky situations like end of turn March of Multitudes, and then I don't have an instant speed removal spell, or a lot of them do run the well, I can't think of the Arch of Vraska, as well as it's a lot easier for them to start utilizing the Legion's Landing. So they do have a little more game, I would say, versus this Orzhov Control list. However, I still think it's a very easy matchup. We have Field of Runes that can take care of their Arch of Vraskas, and besides the March of Multitudes, that's like the only tricky card in their deck, as they're very susceptible to board wipes and very susceptible once we get the board established. I did make a noob mistake. I actually took back a Trostani with Eldest Reborn, because Trostani says return at the beginning of your upkeep, return all creatures you own back to their owner's control. And so Trostani went back to my opponent's control, and he cast a Sapling Migration, and I didn't have a way to kill my opponent's own Trostani. So that was a new mistake. I don't think I would have won the game anyway. I wish I could go back and show the replays. However, there are no replays at the moment for the Magic Arena. So I'll just kind of go play by play, kind of what happened. We'll go through the deck tech with it. So match 1 versus Mono Blue. My opponent had the God Draw on game number 1 with the turn 1 Merfolk into turn 2 Curious Obsession. However, I did have a turn 3 Golden Demise, and my opponent decided to hook up another Curious Obsession on the Merfolk Branchwalker, or Merfolk Mistbinder, whatever it's called, and then also cast like a Warkite Marauder, I believe. And so I was able to sweep it, and that was basically too much resources that my opponent used. And then I was able to just spot removal with Ravenous Chupacabra and with the Eldest Reborn after that. So game number 2, I did lose to my opponent had a good tempo draw, and it was threat answer, and I wasn't able to answer the last Tempest Djinn, which was like a 10-4, and it made quick work of me. So I lost that one. And then game number 3, I was on the draw, or on the play, so it was a lot easier for me to get to like the Cleansing Novas sooner than my opponent could control the board. So that was a very, very long, grindy matchup, though. My opponent was basically stuck on 7 lands, and we were like 40 cards deep. It was getting quite frustrating that I had like 17 lands out, and my opponent had 7 lands out. So that's how that one went. The Arclight Phoenix was a matchup that was dominated by Vraska's Contempts and the Profane Procession, as well as well-timed Golden Demises. I did not even lose a game. I didn't drop a game, I don't believe, to Arclight Phoenix. It is one of the more tough matchups, but the way that this is built right now, we have like Settle the Wreckages that my opponent had to play around. Yeah, one of the games was close. My opponent milled on game number 2. That's how much resources. So all 4 Arclight Phoenixes and 2 Crackling Drakes were taken care of, and that was what my opponent was actually running. So they weren't running like a full package of Crackling Drakes, and then they ran out of resources. I was down to a 5 life through Mirari's Conjecture with some big shock plays, but it wasn't enough to get me down life total. So that one was a win. Teferi was the most boring matchup ever. It was literally land go, land go, land go, land go, land go, because I had to bait out the counter spells. And luckily for me, I hit treasure maps on turn 2 both games, and that just puts you so far ahead. I also believe I had an Arguel's Bloodfast in game number 2, and so the card advantage was definitely in my direction. This was the heavy Teferi's control. I think the other threat was just a Niv Mizzet, and my opponent did scoop after I killed the second Teferi. And then game number 2, they didn't have the greatest draws, and I was able just to rip their hand out and win that way. The mono red matchup was 2-1. Game 1 lost just a 1-drop, 2-drop, 3-drop, burn, and was on the play or on the draw, so I wasn't able to stop that. Game number 2, my opponent kind of flooded with an Experimental Frenzy, took care of the Experimental Frenzy, won the game. Game number 3, I was able to Ixalan Binding, I believe, 2 of their cards, and before Ixalan's Binding, I was able to sweep a treasure map and an Experimental Frenzy, so my opponent went kind of aggressive with a Cleansing Nova, and then they just couldn't recover from that. So that was kind of the matchups. Golgari was down to the wire too, I believe, game number 2 for Golgari. No, I lost game number 2 to the Merfolk Branchwalker into double Jade Light Ranger, and with the Cleansing Nova stuck in my hand, but I was dead before I could actually shoot it off. And then the game number 1 was pretty easy because they didn't have a lot of removal. Game number 3, it looks like my opponent brought in like tons of Thrashing Brontodons, tons of Planeswalkers, and was able to draw a lot of Plaguecrafters, Sweepers, and Eldest Reborns, and eventually my second Eldest Reborn taking his Vraska was the difference in the game. So again, that's kind of an overview of the deck tech. I know you're looking at a blank screen here. Let's go ahead and claim our prize here, and then I'll go through the deck tech. This Vinard, Loxodon, Naban, and a Runaway Steamkin have thousands of these. Hey, look, I get to add something to my collection. A1 Naban, and these go towards the vault. It'll be nice once that they change the vault that you can't get duplicates. I think that'll be actually a lot easier to get a collection when you start getting, with a 5th copy cannot be actually created. So I think that's going to actually be backbreaking for their own economy. I think they might revert that when they see exactly how easy it is for people then to get a bunch of cards when you never have to worry about getting duplicates. So you can just draft a set, and then when you have 4 copies, don't even worry, and you can use your wild cards very, very easily. For that. You'll have your uncommons and common playsets very quickly with that. Anyway, let's go over to the deck list. Now, this is more of a chatty Cathy video than an actual deck tech. This is the Orzhov Control list that I have going on right now. Aggro was being a pain, so I have put 2 Inspiring Clerics in the main, gone back to Seekers Squires, and cut the Seal-Aways. So I don't think Seal-Aways are necessary anymore. The deck is very, very similar to what I've been running, though. We are running the 25 lands now. I suggest you run higher in paper, but MTG Arena just floods. I don't know. It could be anecdotal. I've been playing this game forever, though. It just tends to see that this game gives you more than average lands. There are a lot of times that I'll go through 30 cards in my deck, and I'll be at 60% land. 40% will be in the last 30. Of course, that could just be a bad luck string, but it's just, for me, it just seems that it just tends to that lands are something that you don't have as many issues with. So for right now, I'm running 19 of basic lands, and then 6 of 4 Isolated Chapel and 2 Field of Ruins. Cut the Forsaken Sanctuaries. They're just really, really bad to come and play tapped on turn 2 or turn 2. Yeah, turn 2, turn 3, and turn 4. That can always be bad scenarios. Turn 5 is the one that really gets you if you top deck into Forsaken Sanctuary and need to cast a Cleansing Nova. So mana base is quite easy. It gets a ton better with the next set with the got the Shrines. All right, so we're going to start off with our card draws engines with the Arguel Bloodfast and the Treasure Map. These are going to be your key cards versus control. Treasure Map's also like one of your key cards versus like Mono Green or Boros Angels, because you can slap this down on turn number 2. You don't often have to fire away a lot of removal against those particular decks, and then you can use your turn 3 to scry, your turn 4 to scry, and hopefully find that Cleansing Nova on turn number 5. If you do so, your opponent is usually so far behind, and then you can just start spot removaling with the rest of your cards. Arguel's Bloodfast is pretty decent versus those as well. There are some times where your opponent will be very aggressive, and they'll actually flip your Arguel's Bloodfast for you, and you can actually do a turn 4 Cleansing Nova. That has happened quite a bit, where they flipped it, and I've been able to have 5 men on board and Cleansing Nova away and then begin to recover. It happens versus Mono Green a lot more when they go like turn 2 Steel Leaf Champion and then turn 3 the big one. So attacking for 5 on turn 3, and then they attacking for 11 on the next turn, and you're down to 4 life, and it flips, and then you can wipe their board. Yeah, that scenario's happened a lot. Anyway, the two kind of what I call roadblocks are 2 Seekers Squires, 2 Inspiring Clerics. I like a 2-2 split. Gives you more options when you have the Eldest Reborn. They're both decent targets to bring back with Eldest Reborn. Even against control, they're both decent targets if your opponent's not playing any creatures for you to get to back, or you've exiled a Teferi with a Vraska's Contempt and they don't have an option. Inspiring Cleric is a fast clock, so a Seeker Squire is a lot of times a draw card with a 1-2 that applies pressure. If not, it's a 2-3. They're not terrible. 3 Golden Demises. This is really in here for the white decks. These are for the History of Benalia decks. It's key that you need to sweep those cards early. Very good against the Danto Vanguard. Plaguecrafter. Plaguecrafter is going to be your spot removal of choice against both the Planeswalkers from Golgari, the Planeswalkers from the control list like Teferi and Ral, and it's also extremely good versus Nimazet. There'll be a lot of times when my opponent will tap out with Nimazet thinking, oh, at least I get a card, so I can stay above in that card advantage. Well, Plaguecrafter is a 1-for-1, and you take care of it, and it's pretty potent. It also makes your opponent like Heap in Essence Scatters, which a lot of times they want to take out. And if they do take them out, then you do have access to Plaguecrafter just being able to slip through, where a negate does not work. Profane Procession, I like this as a 1-of. I'm thinking about going up into a 2-of. It's very, very potent versus the Arclight Phoenix deck. It's good versus Mono Green. It's good versus Boros Angels. Exiling their cards and eventually using them against them is pretty key. And this is a 3-for-1. Actually, it ends up being a 6-for-1 oftentimes with the Profane Procession. It's often a bad card early, but late game, it's a beautiful, beautiful card. When you have tons of mana, slap it down, start exiling things. Against the Phoenix deck, by the way, I had 2 Crackling Drakes and a Goblin Electromancer underneath the Profane Procession. And so my opponent went to, combo off or bring back the Arclight Phoenix, Vraska's Contempt one of them, put a Crackling Drake back into play with the other one, blocked, and it only took the 6 damage from the 2 Phoenixes that went through, killed the other ones, and then was able to really just get ahead at that point. Chupacabras are good as a 3-of. It's another great little roadblock, kills a creature, chump blocks for a turn. Very, very good target to bring back with Eldest Reborn. Vraska's Contempt is just our premier removal spell right now when we have a very diverse meta of Planeswalkers as the threats and creatures as the threats. Luckily, at this moment in time, though, we don't have any decks that are not using either Planeswalkers or creatures as the threats. So Vraska's Contempt is really the silver bullet that this format needs and wants at the moment. There are also cards like Arclight. Well, besides Arclight Phoenix, there's the Rekindling Phoenix that is a great card to exile, and there are a few other like indestructible cards like Adanto's Vanguard, where exiling it is another way around the indestructibility. I'm trying to think if I believe there's a few other cards that you do need to. Yeah, the Vraska's Contempt is, of course, instant speed, gain 2 life is relevant versus many, many decks, but against Rekindling Phoenix and Arclight Phoenix, very good card. Karn, this is our other card drawing engine as well as our finisher. Karn finishes the vast majority of the matchups, and you can use your first Karns pretty indiscriminately to dig, and then it's usually when I find my second treasure map, I'll use my treasure tokens that are created from the second or third treasure map as just aggressive Karn pump ups. So the second Karn usually comes down after treasure map flips, and then you just start negativing Karn as quickly as possible. They become 4/4 tokens and 5/5 tokens and 6/6 tokens, and they can actually make short work of the deck. We aren't running very many artifacts at all, but you'd be surprised how quickly Karn can actually take over the game. It's also very good with hitting land drops per turn. Karn's +1 usually says reveal the top 2 cards of your library, or your opponent exiles the non-land and you get the land. But I mean, it's pretty good the next turn then get that card back with the put a card from exile into your hand. Cleansing Nova is the best card in the deck, is the whole reason to be playing the deck. It's very versatile. It can kill Ixalan's bindings and seal aways from your opponent, or anything else that is problematic. There have been many games where I've killed Experimental Frenzies and what is it, the Dawn of Hopes, and trying to think of some other cards. Otherwise, it's just a really good sweeper. In the matchup versus Golgari, for example, my opponent had Vraska on 10 and 3 tokens out, as well as a Wild Growth Walker and a Ravenous Chupacabra, so it was really starting to stare down the lethal, and was able to Cleansing Nova and cast an Eldest Reborn, or it was a Plaguecrafter on the same turn, effectively wiping my opponent's entire board and just recovering. So Cleansing Nova works exceptionally well with then following it up with Plaguecrafter / Eldest Reborn. Speaking of Eldest Reborn, is a 4-of in this deck. This is the other alternate win condition, is finding a win condition from our opponent. So Teferi often wins me the game, Crackling Drakes often win me the game, Vraska's, Carnage Tyrants, those type of cards, stealing from my opponent. Doom Whispers, yep, those are the perfect cards to bring back. So you can see that I don't have Doom Whisperer or Lyra in the deck anymore. I just think they're unnecessary. I think they're often like your opponent just keeps in removal when they know you have it. So everything else in my deck is just so useless to try to kill. The Seekers Squire, the Inspiring Clerics, the Plaguecrafters, Ravenous Chupacabra all get advantage when they enter the battlefield, and so they're bad targets for removal. You've already got your 1-for-1, and if it ends up being a 2-for-1, then that's great. Karn, same thing. It's just a very value-based card. If we start putting like Lyras and Doom Whispers and cards that don't give you that advantage, you're left with not where this deck wants to be. It has to be very, very good and conscientious on the card advantage, because eventually your opponents can start top decking you, and they have a lot more cards. Like if they're a threat-based deck, every threat is always relevant at every time and needs an answer. In this deck, you can actually start getting things that are not answers to that particular threat, or like a Golden Demise late game against a Carnage Tyrant is not good. So you need to be way ahead in card advantage to get the specific cards to really keep up with your opponent. And of course, like Karn's perfect for that. Let's go on to the sideboard. So sideboard, I might make some changes here. I think Deadeye Tracker is a card that is worthwhile to maybe even go up to a 4 of in the sideboard. And same thing with Duress. Like these are the two powerful cards. Tocatli Honor Guard is might be on the chopping block. It's pretty decent versus mono red, but you do keep in Ravenous Chupacabras and bring in more Inspiring Clerics. So they oftentimes can shut down those too. Of course, this also can shut down Plaguecrafter. So this can be a non-bow in your deck. I liked it a lot more versus the Golgari Findbroker deck, but I found out that isn't the most difficult matchup ever. So I think Tocatli Honor Guard might be on the chopping block to go up in one more count of each one of these. It also gives us a little better removal package versus or at least tempo package with the Deadeye Tracker and a ability to rip out a Teferi early, or a Search for Azcanta early, or Vraska's Contempts, or those type of cards that can definitely give our deck a problem. So I think this one is on the chopping block. I don't think it's necessary like it once was. 2 Sorcerer Spyglass. This is because the Teferi matchup can be quite difficult. It also can hit Rouse. This can hit Vraskas and Vivians. I usually don't bring it in versus those particular matchups because they have Thrashing Brontodons or just ways to destroy it. So Sorcerer Spyglass, again, is usually just in here for Teferi. I think Teferi is going to continue to gain a lot of the meta share as it just did take down a Grand Prix. So Sorcerer Spyglass, I think, is the best answer we have towards Teferi. And like I said, there's also other things that it can hit because it can actually hit specific land. Can you name the flip side of a card? So it enters the battlefield, look at the target's hand, then choose any card name. So it doesn't have to be in their hand, or I have to play with more Sorcerer Spyglass. But it's a great way to shut down, problematic planeswalkers. Of course, I'd like something like a Needle to be printed. Hopefully that does get printed in the next set. It was printed in the last Ravnica. What was it in, like Return to Ravnica? So maybe they think that's like a Rakdos theme is the Needle. So hopefully we're getting Rakdos next set, we can get a Needle, and this will really help versus like Teferi. 2 Inspiring Clerics. Again, the aggro matchup does require you, especially the mono red, and especially the red black, to have a way to gain some life and stop that initial bleeding. And Inspiring Cleric equals 2 Vaishino's, I always forget the Vaishino's name, equals 2 of those for 4 life, or what ends up happening a lot of times is it gets shocked. So it's literally like Inspiring Cleric gains 6 life. Even gets Lightning Strike sometimes, and it survives the Goblin Chain Whirler. If you have to chump block a Goblin Chain Whirler, it's like gaining 7 life off of 3 mana. You could go Revitalize here. I just think Inspiring Cleric plays a little bit of double duty, that it's not that bad game 1 versus Control. Like it can be a tempo card that can it's a 3/2 for 3 mana. That is pretty aggressive. It's 7 turns of attacking in, and oftentimes that's all you need versus Control, is just to establish that threat, and then they have to answer it, and then sometimes you have a free reign for a cast for like a Karn or something else on that turn, or they don't answer it and you just keep getting there for 3, and the game is quickly taken over. Binding is something I bring in versus mainly the Phoenix deck. It's also good versus Nimazet. It's good versus Crackling Drake. It's good versus Rekindling Phoenixes. It's good versus Planeswalkers. I don't necessarily like it too much versus the the Golgari just because they usually have ways to destroy it. It's also very slow versus like Boros and Celestia, so oftentimes I don't bring those in versus that particular deck either. So it's like, it feels to me like all the decks that Vraska's Contempt is good against, Binding becomes our 5th and 6th copy of Vraska's Contempt. And so, again, this could be a card if you cut the Tekalti Honor Guards that you could go up in numbers. I cut the Tekalti Honor Guards, put 2 more Seekers in the main, put 2 more Inspiring Clerics in the sideboard could be a route to go. There's a lot of ways you can mix and match, depending on the meta, depending on what you think you're gonna see. Let's go on to the Settled Wreckage. This is a card that I strictly just bring in versus the Phoenix deck. It depends on how they build the deck too, whether it's good or not. If they run negates and cards like that, then it ends up being quite terrible. But there are some matchups there. Settled Wreckage is really good. I'll bring in versus Celestia tokens as well, even though, I mean, they end up getting a ton of lands. It's the only answer we really have to March of Multitudes. They can still, like, a smart player will only attack them with a few at a time. But that actually gives you time to like top deck a Golden Demise or a... The whole thing is that like end of turn, March of Multitude, swinging for lethal, that requires an answer. This is the best we have for it. Everything else is sorcery speed in our deck. So hopefully with Orzhov we can get like, what is it, the Plague, all tokens get -2, -2. That'd be perfect. That'd be perfect to add to this mix. If you're really worried about tokens too, you could add the Plague Mare. I don't think Plague Mare is as relevant as I'd like it to be right now in the meta, as a lot of creatures have 2 toughness. I mean, everything is already playing around Chain Whirler, and it's pretty meh for that point. So that's kind of my overview. I know this has been a long deck tech. I'm not going to do any gameplay. I do have to run down to the store. Again, I probably should start streaming these more often. I play a lot better without the without having to commentate, without having to worry what I'm saying or if it's coming across okay. I tend to play a lot faster when I stream or tape videos, which of course in Magic the Gathering that's not a good, because I don't like to edit videos, so I don't want to be editing out a bunch of dead space. But of course that leads to misplays, that leads to some stupid decisions, and for that reason, like, I like just recording a showing you. You have proof there. Went 5-1 with the deck. Those were the matchups. And it did very, very well. So if you're looking for a deck that really punishes these, what I like to call Sam Stoddard decks, these all-in creatures, it looks like we've kind of moved past that. But for like a week there, with Boros and Mono Green and Mono Red being the whole bulk of the meta, it was just silly to see these pure creature decks, especially Mono Green. You can ask like Zach. I made this deck when I was pissed. I was sick and tired of going up against Steel Leaf Champion deck every stinking game. So I just created this deck just to punish the people that are running pure creature deck. So it's a fun deck to run if that's what your meta is. And it is a control deck, but what I really like about this deck is it really feels like playing Magic. The games go to the distance versus both Mono Blue and Golgari, and even Phoenix. Phoenix milled one game. So that's how long these games go. There's a lot of decisions you have to make correctly. You need to know when to blow your removal and when to hold it. There are definite times to even like run a Plaguecrafter out and do an empty board to make your opponent discard a card. There are some good decisions to be made with this deck, and it really, really, really feels like playing top-notch Magic. It's not Sam Stoddard. It's not just play a Llanowar Elves turn 1, turn 2, play a Steel Leaf Champion, turn 3, do a Nullhide Ferox and just hope that they don't have any answers for it and literally turn your card sideways. Like, those are the type of decks I try to avoid playing. I think they're very boring to play. But the matchups actually get kind of a nice little cat and mouse when you're playing against those type of matchups. It makes your opponent actually try to outplay you as well, rather than just go on autopilot. And yep, anyway, that's the overview of the deck. Hope you enjoyed it. This has been Kevin with Rogue Deck Builder. Thanks for watching.